We're live. We are live, folks. Sorry, Russ is like, before we go live. No, I'm sorry. There's like a 5-second delay there. Apologize.
No, I just found it interesting, and it's sort of breaking right now that
I'll say it's breaking.
to follow along. No, Russ, he's not. To follow along the lines of the of Magic Johnson buying into the LA Dodgers, a group not headed because it was apparently the two groups that are merged into one, but Derek Jeter and Jeb Bush, the brother of former President George W. Bush, they're at the head of an ownership group that is buying the Miami Marlins for $1.6 billion. And all I can say is this: if I had $1.6 billion, I would not spend it on the Miami frickin' Marlins.
The problem is, it's just, again, they're never going to fill the stadium unless Derek Jeter puts on a uniform. It's not going to happen. That's the bottom line. They could be as good as they're going to be. Those fans out there do not care about baseball. Actually, I'm going to tell you something even worse. Early in the season, when they were getting nice weather and the Mets were in town, they kept the roof sealed. It was like 75, 80 degrees. It's like, what's the point? It's a culture living in air conditioning. It's awful. Yeah. Actually, I'm going to tell you something even worse. Early in the season, when they were getting nice weather and the Mets were in town,
why are we getting
the roof seat?
Whoa! Why are we getting?
Sorry. There we go.
Oh, okay. Wait a second. It was insightful the first time we heard it.
I didn't say it twice.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was that insightful either the first time I heard it.
It is a.
And I had friends of mine who went there because it was right during Passover. So I had friends of mine who went to the 16-inning game that Thursday night.
Yeah.
Well, all I know is, and because Gretzky had a piece of the Arizona Coyotes, and that whole thing led to his self-ostracization from the NHL for a decade. So I don't know if this is ever going to happen in the NHL. I don't know how, if down the road, Jonathan Taves or Patrick Kane are going to want to buy an NHL franchise. But it probably thing is, it's like they don't make as much money as a guy like Derek. I mean, Derek Jeter was making $25 million a year at the end of his career, and is apparently worth over $400 million.
Don't worry, the Bush family business makes more money than we ever want to know about.
And Jeter's got a wife who makes a pretty good chunk of change on her own right.
Yeah. Well, apparently the other group that we were involved, it wasn't the Kushner that's married to Ivanka Trump. Or
thank God.
Yeah, it was his brother.
Oh, it's his brother.
Oh, good.
It was his brother, and
another criminal.
Yeah,
another criminal.
Careful.
Yeah, and the son of Mitt Romney was also.
You know about his father.
Well, so let's not talk about it. Please.
Yeah, but let's not go there.
Yeah, and the son of Mitt Romney was also involved. So
okay, I do have one more small thing to add, and that is when we had the NFL draft coming up here in Philadelphia, and the NFL and all its just weirdness decided to have this draft outside, right?
Yeah,
I know it's on. They're saying I drove past the other day. It's setting up the thing where they would have the.
And right now it's getting pelted with rain. They still have time until Thursday. Now we're all basing this on the weather report, which you know how much you could base on the weather report that it's going to be clear Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But here's the funny thing: on the third day, it will be 88 degrees. There will be guys schwitzing waiting to get drafted. That's all I can say.
Put the guys in the green room and let them sit there like Aaron Rodgers did for like 23 picks and see what they look like in their suits.
First day, it's going to be like 72 degrees. Third day, 88. So there's never been a better reason to get drafted in the first round than this draft. That's all I can say.
And they'll be outside again. Like, what's the point of this? Like, is it the point of okay, they're sitting there saying, okay, the Wells Fargo Center wasn't available?
I don't know why you would have it outside.
Well, they had it partially outside when they did the draft in Chicago, but it was inside, but there was also sort of like an outside venue as well. I don't know. I don't get it.
Here's what they did, and Eck could probably say that this is ridiculous, and I laugh at it. They wanted to include the Rocky Steps. Those are not called the Rocky Steps. I just want to let people know that those are the Art Museum steps. The Art Museum steps way before this movie about a fictitious guy in not a fictitious city, but a fictitious guy living in the city of Philadelphia.
But they built a statue for him.
I know.
Are the draftees actually going to run up the steps? That's what's going to happen.
What I can tell, they are.
Great. And as they're running up the
Not
steps,
all of
they're going to blow both ACLs.
Not all of them. It looks like they have just some of them.
I heard what happened when they get up top is they chase a chicken for a while.
So instead of having the 40-yard dash, you have the run up the stairs and you time that. That's one of the activities before the draft.
I mean, that's every Falcons try to do that at some point or another.
I don't get it.
No, I mean, if we're going to do the whole thing, then some of the offensive linemen can emulate Ivan Drago and get shot up with steroids.
Just imagine if you're walking up those steps and you are 300 pounds and you're wearing a suit and it's at noon on Sunday and Saturday and it's 88 degrees. Just imagine that.
And you get winded and your team goes, why the heck did we draft the guy who can't walk up the stairs and not get tired?
Well, Russ, last thing, what I'd like to know is which first round pick is going to get busted by a YouTube video or an Instagram video.
All right, well, here's the thing. I did have a tweet that the only draft that you have to check your police blotter before drafting is the NFL draft. And that's true because there's already a player, Reuben Foster, who's not even allowed to go to the draft. Like he's already forbidden for going to the draft. And I'm not even going to get into all of it. I already talked about it once, but it's a crazy league. That's all I can say.
Supposedly the cornerback from Ohio State today also had something come out about him about a possible arrest. So
I'm telling you, these guys have to scour. They might as well just have the police radio on the draft table so they can make sure that they're getting the right guy and nothing's happening before them.
No, you know how boxers have their entry music. So what's going to happen is when some of these guys who are on the police blotter, they get drafted. They're going to play "Bad Boys, Bad Boys." What you going to do? Anyway.
Okay. There you go. Well, all right. Let's. Yeah, I mean, this
on
is
that note.
It's interesting that this is the same place, where the Pope spoke not too long ago. This setup, this is where you can always hear, before Tops play on New Year's Eve or whatever. This is like
Money's money, Eck.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, and by the way, as we're talking, the thing just came across from ESPN. Ohio State cornerback Gary Conley accused of rape. Police investigating allegations.
Joy to the world, folks. Joy to the world.
All right. Well, that's All right. On a lighter note,
just follow me, Jan.
Let's start the show here. Yep. All right. I just want to throw this in before the show because it's hockey related and I thought it was fun. For a second. So this is if you follow the country of Egypt ice hockey, the Egypt ice hockey team. They're doing a lot. It's funny, I follow all these obscure ice hockey teams.
Mm-hmm.
Egypt ice hockey, which is at Egypt ice hockey. They kind of won the internet today with this picture. I'll show you this picture. So this is really cool. So I thought this was fun. All right. So they posted this picture today.
They posted a picture of you?
No, this is just a hockey player. This is the Egypt ice hockey thing, but they have a goalie in front of the pyramid.
That's awesome.
Well, hey, look at this. The goalie's 5 holes, the same size as the pyramid.
I know. And which was
hard. Trouble with the rinks and humidity, though. I remember reading about that.
Oh yeah. But it was almost as difficult to build an ice hockey goalie in Egypt as it is to build a pyramid in Egypt because this really they have had
or at least a good one.
Yeah. So there you go. So anyway, that's that. Let's move on. Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. Today is April 25th, 2017.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Jan Levine.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday at this time to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world. And I don't know about you guys, but to be honest, I am completely sick of not having hockey to watch tonight. There's something very addictive about the playoffs, and the regular season is great. And in the regular season, if there's not a game on, you're like, okay, I got other stuff I can do. But in the playoffs, I get mad. I get really mad when this. Don't you get? I get mad when there's nothing to watch.
I don't get mad, Eck, because I have to review a couple of games that I watched already for my show over the weekend, and they were from the under 18, so they're on my DVR. So I'm continuously watching hockey until the NHL starts up again anyhow.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to remember. I mean, there would have been Game 7 Capitals Leafs tonight. There would have been Game 7 for I think the Rangers and Canadians last night. So it's just a product of none of the series going 7 games. So I mean, it's only 2 days. I mean, what will be tough is when the season is over with and you have 3 months.
Yeah, and it just stinks because the first round is so great, and after the first round of the playoffs, there's always a letdown. I mean, to me, like there's whether there are 8 series in the first round of the playoffs, and then there's only 7 for the rest of the entire playoffs, right? So it's like that. So to me, it's just it's so great. And then you have these, and these series are intriguing, but I wouldn't say when I was looking at them, I'm not trying to sell them short, but it just doesn't feel like beyond Pittsburgh and Washington that I'm really that interested in some of these. These aren't really rivalries, so to speak. I mean, St. Louis, Nashville, okay, you can say that's interesting. It's got its own thing to it. That's probably the second most interesting series.
I mean, I'll be the sunny optimist here, which is not a role that I usually take. I actually think that all of these matchups have something intriguing about them. To a greater or lesser extent. I mean, Washington, Pittsburgh is the focal point. Everybody's going to say that's the real Stanley Cup, which I don't think is the case, because I think Pittsburgh is beatable and Washington is beatable, whoever comes out of that series. But I think Ottawa and the Rangers will be interesting. I don't think – I'm surprised Ottawa's gotten this far. And I think
with the Ottawa Rangers, and Jan knows this, you have Brassard against Zibanejad. That's something that at least a couple of fan bases are really invested in, because it's gotten into some hot conversation and testy conversation online.
And with Anaheim, Edmonton, you have McDavid, and everybody's going to want to watch McDavid and kind of see how well he fares against a bigger and more physical team in Anaheim. And so I would say, the first round was great. You had a ton of overtime contests. As last year we had all these game sevens. This year was replaced by all the overtime contests, and it starts up again tomorrow. So you get a day or two, at least for me. Fortunately, my team's in it. I have a couple days to write a couple different blogs and get them up on the site, and that gives me some time to kind of plow through things. And all the preview and predictions are coming out now, and come tomorrow, that Hockey Jones will be met. And we've discussed this before. I'm not enamored with how they've staggered the schedule this year. They should have done one East, one West game each night, as opposed to 2 East and 2 West to start, and then going up against the NFL draft, especially in the U.S. with how important the draft is. I'll be very interested to kind of see what the ratings are.
I did see a weird tweet, and at least the reporter gave the right answer, but there are people apparently still, and we talked about this about a month ago, in Canada that don't like the fact that, like, the Stanley Cup has spent, 24 hours in the United States. You hear on the news while we're in between series, well, there's only a couple of Canadian teams left. Why is this a focus? I don't understand why this is a focus.
Russ, because they haven't.
I mean, there's a group of Canadians out there who think that it's this. I mean, and they invented the sport or whatever, which they didn't do, by the way.
No, I don't think it's. It's
their sport, and if forever it'll be their sport. And you've been in the playoffs, you've been in Stanley Cup games in both countries too. And I was in Edmonton and I was in Ottawa when they were there against Anaheim, and there's something pretty amazing.
I was in playoff games in both countries, not the Stanley Cup.
Yeah. So I mean, I've never seen the Stanley Cup won by a Canadian team, of course, live, but I've seen in all the ones I've covered so far. I've seen 10 other cups, but I think that the Canadian teams they're all getting better. They're all, and I think that's great. I mean, last year you had none make it. This year you had 5 make it, right? So you have 2 in the second round, which is pretty proportionate to how many teams there are in the league. I mean, that's basically about right.
The thing is, it's 25% of the league, or there's 7 teams out of 30, so a little under 20%. I'm sorry, a little over 20%, and they haven't won a cup in 24 years. So that's the reason. Now, the thing is, I don't buy, and I know that when one Canadian team gets eliminated, there are a lot of people who say, "Oh, all of Canada is rooting for." The Edmonton Oilers.
I don't know about that.
Baloney. Right now, there's nobody in Toronto who is rooting for the Ottawa Senators. They're rooting for the Ottawa Senators to do one thing: lose, and lose painfully. If it was the Montreal Canadiens, everybody in Toronto would root for who's your favorite team? The Leafs. Who's your second favorite team? Whoever's playing the Canadiens. That's the way it should be. It should be.
I'm kind of lucky because I have a Canadian satellite dish, so I get to watch TSN and see and get the feel for what's happening in Canada as far as it goes. And every year, for the last couple of years without Canadian teams in there, I've gotten to see how that's handled in the Canadian press and how they kind of handle that. And I'm sure you see it as well, Mike, because you get that stuff flying over the border.
Yeah.
But the fact is, Canada ends up rooting for its hometown guys, like whoever is still in it. Like Crosby, is a big deal. Pittsburgh, I think, is one of the biggest teams in Canada because Crosby is such a big deal in Canada.
Right.
Still, and he's still their captain, and so that Pittsburgh, I know, has a huge following. I was shocked though when Ottawa went to the Stanley Cup Finals at how little support they got from the rest of the country. That was the one. I think that is the one city that doesn't have it.
It's sort of annexed off. It is weird.
Yeah, I think it's because the fans from the Ottawa Senators fans were at one point either Maple Leafs or Canadiens fans, right? So it's like it's a really interesting dynamic. You know, where when Edmonton was in it against Carolina, there was a lot of support throughout Canada about Edmonton being there. Like I really felt like this was a chance for the Canadian team to win it. But no one has the kind of support, you know. And when Vancouver was there, I didn't get it either. Like Vancouver and Ottawa are two very unique situations, I think, because they're looked at differently. But I didn't feel like anything. You know, I really honestly have felt that you know, that if Montreal or Toronto were there, you would get a lot of Canada involved. It's a different. There's more fans of those spread throughout.
Two media capitals also. I mean, that's probably bigger. It's a media capital.
But just throughout the country, there's Maple Leaf fans, and throughout the country, there's Canadian fans, because there's
because they've been in existence for they've been in existence for 100 years. But I mean, Ottawa is sort of a transient town because it's a government town. That's really you know, like, I mean, there's obviously people there, but you know, the city is like representatives from all over the country. So that's probably why that they're, you know, not they don't. I mean, I very rarely, unless Ottawa's playing Toronto or Ottawa's playing Montreal, very rarely see Ottawa games on Hockey Night in Canada. It's always Toronto and Montreal in the East, and then, you know, Calgary, Edmonton, or Vancouver in the West. But yeah, I don't think that there would be any kind of great hue and cry if Edmonton, you know, I think there would be a lot of support for Edmonton if they went to the final, or Calgary in a different year.
What happens? All right, so is there going to be like American bashing if Edmonton and Edmonton and Ottawa are out this round? I get the sense there will be.
There always will be a little bit, but it's not totally fair, because, you know, there are great fans in Canada, and there are great fans who are great Ottawa Senators fans. You know, like and as I sit there and say that they were once Canadians or Leaf fans when there wasn't a team there, that's true. But that was a long time ago now. So there's a lot of solid Ottawa Senators fans. I mean, I have a good friend who's a Columbus Blue Jackets fan. Now, he grew up a Red Wings fan because that's all they had, right? But now he's completely, since the second the Blue Jackets moved into his town, he's like became a Blue Jackets fan, and that's it. So,
you know, everybody says nobody cares about hockey in the States, right? Yet the States is the reason the NHL stays in good shape, because they needed a lot of those other teams to sort of move at least into the direction of being a bigger sport than they were back in the day. But here's the funny thing. I find that when I wear the Vegas, I don't know why, but when I wear the Vegas hoodie, I'm telling you, people stop me on the street, and it's not like everybody. Yeah. But I get stopped on the street and people start talking hockey. It's almost like a universal signal for hockey now. And it's not even like if I were wearing a Flyers, you know, logo item. It's because of that, because it's something new.
It's new and cool. It's new and cool.
But there are a lot of fans that do talk about the sport and live it and love it. And I just think, you know, I do think American hockey fans sort of get a bad rap with this.
Well, I don't think that, you know, like if both Canadian teams get eliminated, you're going to have this na from U.S. fans to Canada.
No, you won't.
I not at all. I think all it's going to happen is you're going to have Canadian outlets sort of doing that self-analysis. Like after '98 in Nagano, they did that. You know, they held some sort of conference to find out what was wrong with Canadian hockey. You know, there'll be some sort of analysis of, you know, why are the Canadian teams not winning? Well, they're not winning because they're not good enough. But I think that they're all on at least some of them are on a path right now where, you know, maybe Edmonton's on an upward path, Toronto's on an upward path. So I think eventually you're going to have one win a Stanley Cup. But right now, they're all simply just not good enough.
And I assume most of it's probably they're going to probably go looking for McDavid to take that next step. And he's the guy that they're kind of hanging their hat on right now with Montreal and Toronto. And I think Ottawa's got, we discussed a couple of good storylines. Clearly, the Craig Anderson story, the Clark MacArthur story, right? Carlson playing through the injury, but he doesn't have. None of them necessarily have the cachet as McDavid did, who's been anointed as the next one. And I'm assuming the NHL also would love to see a Edmonton versus either, I mean, any of them, New York, Pittsburgh, or Washington, given the storylines that they can hype. That's kind of something that the NHL would use to try to grow the ratings. But in Ottawa or in Toronto or Montreal, you wonder whether or not it's going to have the same kind of an impact as if one of them made a deep run into the postseason.
Yeah, no, I think that's true, and I think it's fair. And I mean, the only time I get upset about this whole fan thing, and the only time I really see Canadian bashing that bothers me, where Canadians are bashing Americans, is when American fans at fan bases are like what I've seen over the years in Nashville or Arizona, places like that, where there have been people just where Canadian fans have really ripped into U.S. fans.
Well, I mean,
there is a little bit of controversy too. Sorry, Mike. There apparently were some Ranger fans that booed the Canadian national anthem. I mean, if that's true, I didn't hear it, but if it's true, there are boobs in every fan base. You can't just condemn.
I've heard the American
fan base
booed in Canada too. I mean, and that there are idiots everywhere. And
and honestly, my view is those idiots should be nicely escorted out of the stadium. Right. And they don't deserve the right to have their seats, plain and simple.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they're allowed to make their statements that they want to make.
But that reaction regarding Nashville and Arizona from Canada is because they believe that there are markets in Canada that would support. And Nashville is a good market now, but at the point where Balsillie was talking about buying them and moving them to Hamilton or wherever it was, or Kitchener, Waterloo, or right now Quebec City, they believe that there are markets that would support a hockey team, whereas Arizona has been given, it's got not 9 lives, but 99 lives to give that team a chance to succeed, and it hasn't. And that's, Canadian fans think, okay, we want that team because we won't have the same problem.
Yeah, and that's when Blackberries were relevant too.
Right, that team's a little different.
Wait, they're not?
There's Tampa. I mean, Tampa's a great Tampa, Carolina. I mean, I've seen it all, different situations where Nashville sold out every game this year. I don't think the Ottawa Senators sold out every game this year. So, I mean, there's interesting things there. That it does take a while. It took 25 years for Nashville to become a real super hockey market, but that's not abnormal. That's about right. That's really how it works. But now you have a really solid market there. So, I mean, we'll see. I know, Mike, you were up in Toronto today for Breakdown Day up there, so I wanted to talk to you about that. What was the scene like? What did you see? What happened up there?
Well, I mean, there were a number of players that, I mean, obviously they're disappointed that they lost to Washington. They were a heavy underdog, but it was almost a little weird that, there was a sense of satisfaction for the fact that this team went from 30th to making the playoffs, and every game being a 1-goal game or an overtime game against a team that is, that won the President's Trophy 2 years in a row. So, I mean, there was that sense of accomplishment and pride, but when you got to Mike Babcock and when you got to Lou Lamoriello, it was like, we're not satisfied. We got to get better. We got to get better. We got to get better. And then they're pounding that philosophy. And the thing is, I mean, they realize now this was the year where there were no expectations, that everything was flying under the radar. And, the team got a standing ovation a minute after they had lost an overtime game in Game 6. It's not going to be the same next year. They're going to be expected to be a playoff team, expected to be better. And I think
the media pressure is going to be back again, right?
The media pressure will be back, yes, but I think there's also internal pressure. They realize where the areas of the team that need to be improved. But Lamoriello was very careful when he said, we're not going to make a move for the sake of making a move just to address an area that we think needs to be addressed. If we give up too much in a deal, say for example, they hurt themselves. So they're going to be patient, but they also know that there are opportunities out there. And he pointed to expansion, and that's where there are teams that are going to have situations in expansion where they may have to get rid of players, and that might be a situation where the Leafs can take advantage of that situation. So, I mean, I don't think any stone will be left unturned by Lou Lamoriello. I think, they're going to be, if they can get players out of the KHL like they've done the last couple of years, they're going to do it. They're going to be very aggressive in the trade market. It may not come to fruition, but if there are players out there that have a year or two left on their contracts, I think they're going to try to make deals. I mentioned this morning on Twitter that don't be surprised if Will Butcher, who is the Jimmy Vesey of 2017, the Hobie Baker winner from the University of Denver, if he does not sign with Colorado by July 1st and goes to free agency August 15th, that could be a guy that the Leafs go after because it's an entry-level contract. The one thing, Babcock was, the Chamber of Commerce of Toronto should hire Mike Babcock the way he was pumping up.
Man.
He's in big sell mode, and he's in big sell mode for one reason. He wants to attract free agents. So, and that's, it may not be Shattenkirk type free agents, but it's going to be guys we can get, or veteran guys who can come in and be supplemental players and get them for like a little less money because they want to be in Toronto when they win.
Yeah, I think that's safe, and I think they're going to have a really good time getting the kind of free agents they want to get. I mean, and I don't think they want to go for the Shattenkirk type free agents. I don't get that impression at all. I mean, the big I talked about the one guy that I could see them going after, and I heard more about it today is Vlasic as on a trade.
Why is San Jose trading him?
Basically because they have the way their salary structure is looking. From what I've been told, they won't be able to give him the contract that he wants they feel like they have young players that can fill the same spot, and they feel like
that would be such a big mistake.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's what we keep hearing. So,
well, I mean, Burns' contract kicks in this summer, $8 million. Vlasic's got one more year left. I think he's making in the low fours. He's probably going to want to be a $6 million defenseman, and if they can't pay him, and they think their window maybe is closed now with Thornton and Marlowe, exiting the picture potentially, then it might make sense. But and this granted,
but if they exit, then you have the money.
Right. You have $13.5 million to play with. I mean, that's the difference.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the younger players that they have coming up. Doug Wilson has always been extremely conservative with this kind of stuff.
They don't have enough young defensemen. I talked about them being an electric car that was only like half charged, I looked at their system. They are not loaded with young defensemen. They have a few, but nothing like the quality of Vlasic. And so my thought is, let Vlasic run through this season and bring Thornton and Marlowe back on one-year deals, and then worry about it, at some point during the season, say, hey, can we talk? And if they can't, then they try and still get them in free agency like everybody else. But the other two contracts will be gone then.
Yeah, but Russ, the thing is, with 1 year left, and like with the Leafs with Van Riemsdyk and with other players who have the year left in their contracts, San Jose can get a bevy in return for Vlasic. If they have determined they're not going to re-sign him, then it makes more sense to deal him a year out rather than hold on to him, go through the year, maybe trade him at the deadline, and even if not trading him at the deadline, they'll go through the entire year and then losing him in free agency just for the cap.
You may not lose him. Like he likes playing there, and they could give him more money at that point because Thornton and Marlowe will be off the books. I think Wilson's smarter than that. I don't think he's going to trade him. And what are the Leafs going to give him? Jay Gardner? Like, that's not a long-term solution.
No. I don't know. I mean, that's not being discussed, but we know that the Leafs are deep in prospects. But they're
not deep in defensive prospects, and they're certainly going to want one back.
No, they're not. But this is symptomatic of Toronto, and I understand the excitement. They made the playoffs. Now they're hungry for more.
Right. And
the names that are coming out, like in the media, like on Toronto radio, are Doughty,
right,
Ekman Larson, Yarmulson, Duncan Keith. I mean, about trading for these guys. That's it's not all of a sudden patience is out the window. We want to friggin' win now.
So they sound like Yankee fans.
Yeah, but it sounds like, remember, if you look at Pittsburgh when they got good, they added a piece every single year. What Toronto did this year by having all these guys play together, you've taken 4 years of growth and accelerated it in basically a year. So that there is a cause for optimism. Granted, there's holes, but you've added pieces that you expect that Matthews and Marner and Brown and Hyman and all these guys are going to continue to get better. And you've taken 4 years of growth and put it into one. So, look, Babcock, what is Babcock going to say? No, we're happy with regressing? He'd be crazy to say something like that.
Right.
Right. But the thing is, Jan, is that in the past, the driving force for improve was either the MLS&E board or the fans saying, come on, you got to be good. I think the impetus for this get better now is Babcock. I think he wants.
Oh, it is. He's pushing it. It still doesn't mean Shanahan and Lou are going to jump because Babcock's saying to. Right. I mean, again, I still think it's 50-50 that they go further in the playoffs or even regress and don't make the playoffs. I think it's 50-50 for next year because they have so many young guys. You can't guarantee everybody's going to perform the same way or better next year. Like that's a pipe dream.
You can't guarantee that, but you have so much talent there that to think that they're not a playoff team, especially in that division.
But they stayed relatively healthy too. Like, what if they have some big injuries?
I mean, if Marner and everyone goes down in the first week of the season or whatever, yeah. But they've got so much talent that that division is not strong still. It won't be strong next year.
Yeah, but Tampa will be better. Florida will be better.
Yeah, Tampa will be much better next year.
Buffalo.
Yeah, sure. I'll give you Tampa, but Boston's not going to be better. Ottawa is
Ottawa going to be as good?
Yeah.
Montreal's gonna be worse.
Montreal might not be as good.
You can make the argument Boston will be the same because McAvoy will be in the mix now, and that's a big deal.
No, that will help them, but they also have players are just getting older, and they have a weird mix there, and who knows? There's a ton. I think that they're a playoff team next year, and I think what we're seeing now, a lot of articles say, of course, and this was so completely predictable, is are they now? And I almost read this article today before I realized I just thought this is just too predictable to write. Are they now like a legitimate cup contender next year? Which I just think that's a little bit crazy to go there, and I don't think there's any reason to go there because they have this huge window ahead of them. So
Ty Anderson broke some news here that I feel is worthy of reading because it works in the conversation. Zdeno Chara confirmed that he wants a new contract after the one in 2018 runs out.
Well, he could want all he wants.
Well, because remember, Chara extended. This was the last year of the big contract. Then he signed a 1-year extension. He's making, I think, like a little less than 5. So he wants to stick around. Honestly,
but this is a big decision now for the Bruins because if they're going to lock into a contract with him, they got to see more out of him. Like, what's the guarantee of that? Otherwise, we could see Chara on the trading block this summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could. It's possible, but I honestly that one I can't see because I think he's so integral to that franchise.
You know what though? But if a team feels like they need one piece and they say, Zdeno, we're going to extend you. We'll sign you and extend you, and the Bruins say they won't extend them, I could see that happening.
Yeah, but Russ, here's the thing that the Yankees took forever to learn, and you know just as well as I do. You pay for future performance, not for what somebody has done in the past. And Chara started regressing the last couple of years, and as valuable and as integral as he is, to sign him after 2018 to an extension for a decent amount of money and eat up a ton of cap room is probably not the wisest use of your assets, even though as valuable and as important as he's been to your franchise.
Well, you said
a team on the cusp that is going to feel like, you know what? If we sign him to 3 years and we get 2 out of him, so be it. We might win a Stanley Cup by doing it. The same way with Chris Pronger. Chris Pronger was pretty much close to the end of his rope when he signed with the Flyers, and he managed to have a couple of good seasons, and then that was it.
You said the right words, though, Jan. Reasonable amount of money. If he takes less, just like Thornton and Marlowe, if they take less, then
is he taking less to stay in Boston? I doubt it.
Well, that's to be determined. One last thing about the Leafs, I found it very interesting that nobody. There were a couple players who were sort of waiting for word, but nobody. Matthews, Zaitsev, nobody was going to the World Championships. Zaitsev was
got a concussion. He's still recovering from that.
Yeah, no, Zaitsev was cleared to play in the playoffs. He played games 3, 4, and 2 through 6 in the playoffs, but he's not cleared to go play in the World Championships. Interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
Which I think means, the talk is that Zaitsev has got his deal done with the Leafs, the extension, and they don't want to risk him getting another concussion on top of the one that he got just before the start of the playoffs.
So a couple other quick things. Boyle also says he wants to come back, right? Brian Boyle wants to come back.
Well, we knew that.
Yeah. Well, yes. And I was standing next to him when he said it, but he said it in the sense if things can be worked out, I'd like to come back. He'd like to come back, but they would have to make a competitive offer, and that's what I don't know whether the Leafs will or not. They might. They gave up a second-round pick for him, but I no, it's not for sure. The interesting thing was like Van Riemsdyk and Bozak, with a year left in their contracts, they can sign new deals on July 1st. And they both expressed, willingness and wanting to stay in Toronto, but their responses were tempered by the fact that their names are very frequent in trade rumors, and the team might decide that they can spend that money someplace else instead of holding on to them for one final year Because I don't think, I mean, they may be better. They may be a playoff team next year, but I don't think they're a Stanley Cup contender next year.
You know what's funny? I could see Bozak staying because he at least has worth on faceoffs and seems to have picked up the Babcock system, where Van Riemsdyk is still sort of floating through that system, even though he had a nice amount of goals this year.
And they have a lot of wingers in their system, Russ.
Yeah. The coach, we had a coach, well, not hiring yet, but everybody appears to be on the same page that Travis Green will be the new coach of the Vancouver.
Finally, he's getting it done.
Yeah. Travis Green has earned this spot for sure. I think it's a good hiring. I really was a Willie Desjardins fan, and I didn't think this was his fault, but
no, it's not his fault.
And I think Desjardins will be back in the NHL at some point, and I hope somebody gives Desjardins another shot because I really think he's a top-notch coach as well. But this is good for Travis Green, and a little bit of excitement for Vancouver fans out there as well.
I think the key question with Vancouver is when eventually do they move on from the Sedins, and is that organization, since being tied to them, are they kind of, they both given the salaries at $7 million a year for a couple more years, kind of a huge albatross around the neck of the Canucks franchise?
Yeah, I don't think they can do anything about it.
No, they can't. Which is why 4 years and $28 million made absolutely no sense when they gave it to each of them.
Yep.
Well, I think that this is the final year, correct? I'm pretty sure it's the final.
I think they have 2 years left, if I'm not mistaken.
They might have 2 years left, Mike.
Well, if it was the final year, I'm trying to pull up our cap.
Next year is the final year, so they got another $7 million next year.
Right. So they can retain 50% of the salary. I mean, you telling me that they're not a good?
They're not moving them. I would be shocked. Those guys have been.
Well,
you traded up to make sure to get both of them. I can't see you sending them to go somewhere else during.
Yeah, you see, here's the thing. Back in the day, if you traded the Ferraros, what was the combined salary? $250,000. This one's a little too much.
Well, I mean,
no offense. I love the Ferraros.
A slight disparity between the two groups of brothers there, Russ.
Oh, come on, Jan. Don't be critical.
I'm not counting AHL stats over here.
The owners in Vancouver love the Sedins, and the bottom line is the Sedins will stay in Vancouver as long as they want to stay in Vancouver. And that the ownership there group. I mean, I know for a fact the ownership group will basically let them do whatever they want. And that is a problem. I mean, it can be a problem, but they're also not they're still performing. They're still really good players. So at this point, it's not a problem yet. I mean, it's not like they've fallen off to be, 10 goal scorers apiece or anything like that. They're still performing. They're still solid. If you could find a really solid line mate for them, which has been like a running joke throughout their career, right? That who knows if they get another burst out of that. So it's possible.
Well, I mean, the only thing is that the hiring of Green signifies that they're going young. They started on that direction with the two trades that they made at the deadline. Trading Hansen for Goldobin, trading Burrows to Ottawa for Jonathan Dahlen. So those are future moves. Now they've hired a future coach, not a guy who's a now coach. I mean, he's a good coach and he can work with veteran players, but I think he's, one of the reasons they brought him in is because he can work with kids, and he's worked with these kids. So to me, I mean, I think the chances of the Sedins getting moved, in spite of the fact that they're, loved in Vancouver, loved by their ownership, I think they're fairly high as you get closer to the deadline, and the fact that Vancouver can retain up to 50% of the salary. You can get two for the price of one.
Here's a big question. How did we go through like a whole 15-year career of Ulf Dahlen, calling him Dahlen, and then his kid gets drafted and it's Dahlin? Like, when did that happen?
I know. I thought that too. I know. Names are apparently, from Europe are apparently, voluntary. Like the way they can decide however they want to be called. Because we've had some players that have been called everything under the sun.
I've used the example many times, Russ. Frantisek used Cabrera. Thomas used Cabriolet.
Right.
Yeah.
These are brothers. Okay. So there's one pronunciation here. I'm sorry.
Interesting quote sent to me. This is from Sean Harnett, who wrote that New York Rangers Alain Vigneault on his players' affections for Derek Brassard is there will be no tapping of the butt as we go by on the ice, he says, about Brassard.
Would there have been anyhow? I don't know.
They had the video tribute when he came in November, so I think they got that out of the way already.
Yeah.
I mean, was Brassard not a popular player in that room?
No, he was very popular.
He and Zuccarello are like still best friends. There's pictures of them all over the place.
Yeah.
So
it's kind of the way he implies this. It's almost like he kind of goes out of his way. It was kind of strange, But right now, who knows what's happening in media, because I want to throw this out as a really, this is to me, I was thinking about working on this for tomorrow. I was talking to Kevin Allen about this thing. It's just the craziness about this whole situation, okay? This happens every year, but I would love to, if I had like the staff of like a Colbert show or whatever, to put together the quotes that are being put together by the Penguins and the Capitals, as both teams are desperate to be called the underdog in this series. It's incredible. Just as they go back and forth, it's like, the
But you can't be the underdog if you're the Stanley Cup champs. If you're the defending champ, you can't.
Yeah, right. Backstrom comes out yesterday and says, they're the favorite for sure. They're the favorite, and then somebody in Pittsburgh says, well, they have the best record in the league, but we'd be lucky to win a couple games in this series.
Blah blah blah.
But you get this thing where like it'll continue into the playoffs, into the round. Like I remember, I forget, I think it was you guys that we were covering. I want to say for some reason it was Vancouver, or it was the Rangers and somebody that we were
Rangers Kings.
It was the Rangers Kings, where we sat there at every press conference and no one said anything nice about their own team and everything nice about the other team every press conference. It was like you're so worried about chalkboard, they just couldn't compliment the other team enough. And it just got sickening after a while. And you're just like, it was so, it's so,
But this is like a false equivalency. Anybody who writes this is crazy because they know how much these two teams hate each other. They don't
know it's crazy, but to me, it's so. I mean, how dumb. I mean, it feels. It's to the level of superstition. You know what I mean? It feels like it's beyond just saying that you don't want to.
Players are hoping that the media will slurp it up, but you have to know better.
It's like it's not just about we don't want pressure on our team. It's really about like it really feels like superstition. It feels crazy, like just beyond. I mean,
when Malkin starts crediting Ovechkin for things, and Ovechkin says Malkin's like the greatest player in the league, then I'm going to worry.
No, but actually, I heard something like that the other day, and I agree.
No, you did no.
I heard Malkin say Ovechkin was an awesome player, and I was shocked. I was shocked.
And a better friend.
No, but I was shocked. I was shocked to hear the whole thing. And
that is a little shocking. I'll admit that.
The only person who seems to be able to handle this at all that I've noticed is Crosby. He comes out today. They asked Crosby about it, and they said, what's the deal? And Crosby says, that's Backstrom said you guys are favorites. They said to Crosby, and Crosby's like, well, you guys can decide who's favorites and not favorites. And that's what he should do. He's like, this has nothing to do with us. You guys can tell us who's favorites, who's underdogs, whatever. But then, and the funny thing about it is it's not coming from Barry Trotz, which is great because Barry Trotz doesn't play these kind of games.
No.
But like Vigneault and Sutter did at one point, or during the playoffs. But so Barry Trotz comes out and says something, and just thank God for him. He comes out and says the honest thing today. He's like, yeah, you know what? We were under a lot of pressure against the Leafs. It's like everybody thought we were supposed to win and they were supposed to lose. They had everything to lose. We had nothing. We had everything to lose. They had nothing to lose. Like that's a tough spot to be in. He comes around and says, love it when a coach will just
It's good to exercise the demons like that sometimes.
There was criticism in some circles in Toronto about Barry Trotz treating the Leafs with too much respect. Like they're a really good team, and it's like, okay, no, if you're the President's Trophy winner and you're playing the 8th place team and they barely got in the playoffs and they have a defense that really needs work. That
5 overtime games, Mike. 5 overtime games. They
no, I'm back. That I know that, but I'm saying going into the series, he was very, very. You don't want a coach to be dismissive of a team like Toronto, but they're an inexperienced team, and he sort of it was like, oh, Austin Matthews, and he gave. At least there was some criticism that he gave the Leafs too much respect, and that was one of the reasons, a contributing factor to the Leafs having a well, whatever. I'm just telling you.
I don't think that occurred though.
When's the last time a coach in any sport has come out and taken a shot at the team that they're facing? I mean, you don't see it anymore.
Well, what was the last time John Tortorella talked?
Torts is definitely done.
Tortorella doesn't count. Tortorella just goes.
Lindy Ruff. It was the greatest. It was the greatest. One of the first things I ever covered. Hitchcock and Lindy Ruff in Buffalo Philly series. Incredible moment when you watch the two of them in a press conference back to back, and someone said to Hitch, "You know what Lindy just said about your team?" And then Hitch like, I'm sitting right in front of him, and he says looking right at me, like he says, "You can bleep and tell him that I think of his bleep and D." It was just like
no. He said, "Go F him." He can go F himself.
He went on. That's what he said as he was walking out the door. He said,
"Yeah." Because he walked out the door, and 3/4 of the media picked up their mics. I was new too. I didn't pick up my mic, and he said, "Oh, and tell him he can go F himself." and only like 3 mics were on there, and I still have that soundbite. It's awesome.
I have it on video because I was still videotaping it. It's funny. It's crazy. Yeah, that was great, and that
and they hated each other. It wasn't even like they disliked each other. They hated each other.
But they did actually have to coach together a couple times in Canada, right?
But during that series, they hated each other.
Oh yeah, no, and they were both also brilliant at that moment of when of how to take the pressure off your own team. Hitch knew how to take the pressure off his team. The Flyers were terrible, and he knew that by saying this quote, that would be all everybody talked about the next day. So he was waiting for anything in that press conference, and then he finally was fed it, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go with it. But Gary Travis and Babcock don't play that game, so it's like when you watch the two of them back and forth, it was completely respectful, and it was all, and it was legitimate. He was legitimately saying what he's not going to say the Leafs are the 8th place seed, but what's so refreshing is after the series he does admit it. He does come out and say, yeah, you know what, we almost choked. And basically, he's like, we could have choked there because this team. And I just love when people do that, but I cannot. Every time it happens, I'm going to tweet it out that when I hear someone just compliment the other team so drastically that it's like ridiculous. It's just because these guys are athletes and they're in there fighting for each other, and then in the locker room they're not sitting there saying, well, they got a really good power play. We'll be lucky to get out of this game alive. That's not being said in the locker room for sure.
But there was some criticism of Trotz early in the series for being too respectful. But
by the way, I was just tweeted the Sedins have full no movement clauses, so forget it.
Well, and it's beyond that because they don't even have to have that.
No,
they have a lifetime contract there if they want it. I mean, they could re-sign them. There's no question.
I'm just saying this: if ownership or the general manager goes to them and says, Henrik, Daniel, we're not going to re-sign you after the end of the season. This is it. If you want to go someplace else, we'll make it possible. I think that's possible because this team is not a contender for the Stanley Cup. They're in a rebuild. They're going in the direction of a rebuild.
Right. Well, before we get out here today, I do want to get, since we have Jan on and we have Russ, I do want to get into a little bit of we'll do a little bit of sneak preview of Ottawa and the Rangers because we'll get into the other previews tomorrow. But I think this is a good night to do the Rangers and Senators series since we got you guys. And sorry to throw that curveball at you, everybody, but I mean, it's obviously we've already thought about it. It's not a big, this is what's happening, sort of. So, I guess I'll start with you, Russ, on this one. What are your thoughts on this as it plays out? This is an interesting situation because, like I said before, this feels like you're going to a lesser team here than Montreal. But
well, it may be lesser in experience and toughness, but it's not lesser in speed and scoring. And Bobby Ryan's as hot as any player in the playoffs right now. Like he's going to be hard for any defensive pairing to hold back. The interesting thing is that Karlsson actually admitted about the stress fractures in his foot. It's not going to matter because he's still putting up points, but 75% Erik Karlsson is still going to be a worry. I thought Ceci played well. I think they do have some good young defensemen who can move the puck, and besides Karlsson, and that is problematic for the Rangers. I think that Girardi has played way better than the Ranger fan base had ever imagined he would or could in these playoffs, and so that's helped the Rangers defense tremendously, where Nick Holden's probably been worse than anybody thought he could be. And so, but still, they have 3 guys they can really count on, and that's a little bit more than Ottawa. They have the goalie situation. What we can't account for is the same thing with the Martin St. Louis factor, the Craig Anderson factor. Like, there is a factor that has really galvanized this team, and now Anderson's wife is traveling on the road, and it's going to be a rallying point to some degree. And so I think when you put all those things together, I think it's a long series. I don't think this is an easy series for the Rangers.
Dan, what are your thoughts?
So, I mean, I agree with a lot with what Russ said. So, in terms of offensively, I think Ottawa's probably a much more balanced team than Montreal is. Montreal placed heavy reliance, obviously, on Pacioretty and Radulov. Pacioretty, for all the criticism he took in Montreal, as I said before, he reminded me a lot of Rick Nash the last couple of years. He did everything but score. Guy had 29 shots in 6 games, couple of breakaways, just was unable to beat Henrik Lundqvist. Ottawa is a much better balanced offensive team. I mean, you look up front, Torres had a big year. Hoffman and Stone both had good years. You look at, as Russ said, Bobby Ryan came back from a poor season overall to be a major difference maker in the playoffs. Erik Karlsson himself is clearly a Norris Trophy candidate from the blue line. and when paired with Mathot, who's a guy who's going to block shots like crazy and willing to be physical.
Yeah.
Their second pairing of Ceci and Phaneuf, I thought, had a really good series against Boston. Phaneuf doesn't have the foot speed anymore, but he made up for it with his smarts, and Ceci's the kind of guy who's physical. Decent third pairing. I mean, Guy Boucher may dress Mark Boriowski to take advantage of his physical play, but that's kind of where I think the Rangers are going to look to take advantage of them. What Ottawa has to face when the Rangers at Boston have is the same thing that the Rangers have to face in Ottawa. The Rangers are a much more deep team. They have 4 lines that can roll. They have 4 lines with a lot of speed. They're going to look to take advantage at times of the breakout pass, but Ottawa's going to play that 1-3-1 zone, so the Rangers are going to have to be smart. It's something they worked on practice today with their Black Aces, finding a way to get through the neutral zone trap, which is what they didn't do in that November game. Chipping passes, tape-to-tape passes, soft dump-ins away from Anderson. Big thing that Anderson does that Price does also is he plays the puck. One of the things that he's very good at to take pressure off the blue line. Rangers are going to have to keep the puck out of the trapezoid when they throw it in to make sure that Ottawa doesn't have a shot. And as I've said before, there's a couple of storylines. I mean, one clearly is the MacArthur return from the concussions, giving them a galvanizing point. 2 is Karlsson admitting he played through a pretty significant injury in the first round, and obviously he's healthy now, or he wouldn't admit it. And 3rd, and the most important, is the Craig Anderson effect. And it's the emotional impact that you can't measure, can't quantify, and can't figure a way to kind of determine what that impact is. You just know that it's a rallying cry for the team. So as Russ said, I personally think this is at least going 6. It's not going to be an easy series. It's going to be one of those 2-1, 3-2, a lot of games, a lot of close games late, a lot of mostly 1-goal games. I don't foresee anybody getting a big advantage. You look at the Boston game, every one of those games was basically a 1-goal game. I wouldn't be shocked if every game in this series coming down the last 3-4 minutes of the game is a 1-goal game in either direction.
Well, I know Borowiecki was injured in the series against Boston, and I'm not sure I think it was a leg injury, so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to play against the Rangers at least early in the series. That third pairing is going to be Chris Weidman and I think Frederick Claesson, and that's not exactly a great pairing, but they're going to play those top 4 defensemen probably 20 to 25 minutes a night, and Mathot is not 100% coming back from that pinky injury. We know that Karlsson's not 100%, and I think for the Rangers to win, which we'll do our predictions tomorrow, but I think the Rangers are going to win this series. They're going to have their forwards, guys like Nash did a very good job forechecking against the Canadiens. Jesper Fast and the quick forwards of the Rangers getting on top of the Ottawa defense. Phaneuf is slow of foot, and you can burn him. He'll cheap shot you till the day is done, but you can get by him and you can make him a liability on the blue line if you do that. And I think the Rangers will do that. But to me, the key for the Rangers is, and Russ and I talked about this on previous shows, Kreider, Miller, Stepan. No shows all in the series against Montreal. They cannot have that happen again. If they show up, they win. If they play like they did against Montreal, then probably Ottawa wins the series.
Yeah, I'm with you guys on a lot of these things. I was trying to look for the biggest stat that I thought would favor Ottawa in the series. I mean, they did win 2 of 3 against the Rangers this year, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
They have shut out the Rangers in 2 of their last 4 games, which is exactly what
it's a good coach, though. So I caution you on that stat, because I think the more they play him, the more video they get on the Boucher system with the players he's using there.
Yeah, that's only one.
And the last one was at the end of the season where it didn't matter for the Rangers, so there's a lot of guys who didn't dress, so I kind of discount that one as well.
Yeah, right, I agree with you. And the first one was really early in the season, actually. So in the middle of the season, when they played right after Christmas, the Rangers won 4-3. But they were all relatively close games. Went 3-1 Ottawa win, 2-0 Ottawa win. But the biggest stat here that separates these teams, a lot of people are pointing out that the Senators actually are 10th ranked, have the 10th ranked defense, and the Rangers have the 12th ranked defense, so goals against. But I think that's ridiculous because of the fact of the divisions these teams play in. I think that has a lot to do with it. You're not looking at a lot of difference there you're looking at a couple goals really. And when you play against the Penguins, Capitals, Blue Jackets,
what that's like? It's like in boxing, if you're the European heavyweight champ and you go face, Muhammad Ali or somebody like that as the heavyweight champ. It's like that.
Yeah.
Frank Bruno versus Mike Tyson.
Right.
But the weirdest stat is the home winning percentage stat right this year, which the Rangers were we're 550 at home.
That's still in question. There's no doubt.
Yeah, but remember, the Rangers started off the season like a house on fire at home and then slumped. I mean, they won 2 out of 3 against Montreal in the playoffs and 2 out of 3 on the road to kind of clinch that series. So I agree with you, the home ice, but the Garden crowd, I mean, Russ, you can attest to this better than I can. The Garden crowd in games 4 and 6 were absolutely off the hook.
Yeah, they didn't like that they were reading. They didn't like reading about that they couldn't be heard. They made sure they were heard.
Yeah, they were
lying. That crowd is like that. That's a huge advantage for them.
Yes.
I mean, so home Ottawa has 615. The Rangers had a 550 winning percentage, but that's not. But 615 is not that great. The weird thing about this is I would think of these teams as being having a bigger point differential. There are only 4 points that separate these teams. The Rangers are 102. The Senators 898. But again, I bring into the fact that the division they played in. I really think that's.
But this is. I go back to this. Should have been reseeded. This is ridiculous that the Rangers don't have home ice. This is the flaw in this playoff structure.
The only way that they played the first place team in the Atlantic in the first round, but the only way that a team with less points should get home ice advantage over a wild card team is if they won the division.
Right.
Then you won the division, fine.
Yes.
But if you're a second place team in one division, you're playing a wild card, and the wild card has more points than you, the wild card should have the home ice advantage.
Absolutely.
And the one thing I'll say is the Senators have shocked everybody all year. So
yeah, there's no doubt.
That's what's got to be nerve-wracking for the Rangers. It's got to be nerve-wracking for the Rangers as well to not go into this too confidently. Like this is a situation where you're going to hear the Rangers give the. And you're doing it. You guys are doing it too, but everybody's doing it. I'm friends with Bobby Ryan. I mean, he grew up in the town, but I'm sitting there, and when you're starting to say that Bobby Ryan is the big factor in the series, I still have a really hard time with it. I mean, I get that he's played very well, and had a great. But that was against a Boston defense that did not look good either. And there was a lot. I mean, this is a very different situation. I mean, I really hope that Bobby Ryan played. And Bobby Ryan has, I think, historically done pretty well against the Rangers, if I'm right. But I'm not sure about that, actually. I know he loves playing against the Rangers.
I can't remember how well he's done against them. I'll be honest.
I don't remember either, but it's interesting. So I guess with Phaneuf, we will not have Sean Avery coming to say sloppy seconds anytime during the series.
You had to go there, didn't you, Jay?
Yeah, they played in 2012. I mean, that was the whole big thing between them. I mean, it got ridiculous.
I was in the room when that happened.
Hey, it doesn't mean in the next day or two Avery won't try and tweet him.
That happened in Philadelphia. Remember that sloppy seconds comment?
Yeah, I do remember.
So you're probably in there too, Russ.
No, I was, because Avery actually was funny because Avery did not play that game.
Yeah,
he walked around the building. He wanted anybody from the media to talk to him and wouldn't. And then I had been told later on that Turco wouldn't even let him in the locker room. He was so mad.
Bobby Ryan's career numbers against the New York Rangers: 16 games played, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Not that bad. Not that great. All right, so and I want to bring up one more thing, and then so we'll talk about the series more in depth tomorrow. But I'm glad we got some good opinions here. Not more in depth, but we'll get a prediction out tomorrow.
Sure.
But the trapezoid rule. Okay, now I know this is a weird time to bring it up, but the trapezoid rule almost found its demise. It was this close to being eliminated forever. And any of you know why that is?
I can't think of it offhand now.
All right, so at the end of that Maple Leafs Capitals game. Right before overtime, as the puck's wrapped around, and you see Anderson waiting for the puck to make it into the trapezoid, and he's behind the goal.
Sorry,
I don't know if you remember, Mike. I don't know if you're listening to what I'm saying, but I don't know if you remember what because this moment. So the puck is wrapped around slowly around the boards. Anderson's standing behind the goal, waiting for the puck to make it to the trapezoid. Like my least favorite play. I hate this. I hate the trapezoid so much. I'm watching him, and then so he peels off the last second, and the Capitals come really close to scoring because he's out of position. The Capitals almost win the series because of the trapezoid. And I was just as it's happening, I think to myself, that is what it would take. Like if the Maple Leafs were eliminated by a trapezoid play like that,
maybe. I
think it would have been gone. I wanted it gone so badly. I just think it's the most ridiculous rule in the sport. I think it's absolutely.
I haven't found anybody that likes it.
There's no point in it, and it was a rule that was made that Ed Snyder got passed as a part of a plea bargain, basically. Really, that's really what it came down to. Like basically during that, after the lockout, I was told it. Ed Snyder, when Bettman was trying to get all the owners to go with him, it was tough to do. And Snyder was one of the more progressive owners who did not want to cancel season. He was like, well, we'll come up with it. We'll just settle this, whatever. We'll figure it out. We'll do the best we can. And Bettman's like, no, you got to stay with us. And when I was told, that rule was basically, Ed's like, well, I'm going to get that, rule, because at that point, that was Marty Brodeur, was just killing the Flyers with, being able to handle the puck so well behind the goal. So
now, is there a rule about using rosin on a stick? Because I kind of wonder, because how many times did Nick Holden lose his stick? Right, like 2 or 3 times.
How many times did Henrik Lundqvist? How about there's an invention called Velcro? Come on.
No, but there's rosin, and baseball players use it. No, pine tar I think they probably wouldn't want to use, because then if you touch the puck it'll get nasty. But I don't see why they wouldn't use rosin.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. Mike, what do you have on Buffalo?
John Shannon from Sportsnet reporting a tentative list. Apparently the Sabres have started to do interviews. The LA Kings still have not been contacted about permission for Dean Lombardi, which would, to me, lean against Lombardi being involved. But the names that Shannon reports are Jason Botterill, assistant GM in Pittsburgh, Mike Fuda, assistant GM in LA, Craig Conroy, assistant GM in Calgary, Lawrence Gilman, I think is he with Vancouver or with Arizona? I can't remember. I think it's Arizona. Paul Fenton, assistant GM in Nashville, and Kyle Dubas, assistant GM in Toronto.
Just like I've done with the last few times, I will personally eliminate Michael Fuda because I don't think he would take the job in Buffalo. I haven't talked to him about it. I have no idea how he feels about it, but he gets paid like a GM, and literally I don't see a reason why he would move from where he is in the position of strength and power that he's in to go and take a Buffalo GM job. To me, I would take him right off the list.
Actually, a lot of assistant GMs on that list, huh?
Yeah.
I know there's more too. So I mean, I think that's a partial list from what I've heard. But
the name I heard was Norm McIver, the Chicago GM, assistant GM, and Sportsnet mentioned yesterday Rick Dudley somehow involved. I don't know if it was GM or president, but we mentioned that before as well. So
yeah, I really hope.
Wasn't there some postulation today that John Chayka potentially could be a guy that they reach out to as well?
Please, I mean, okay. that would just be perfect.
They could reach out. Look, I think we're going to hear a lot of names. I do.
Yeah, and there's some of those names on that list too are just assistant GMs that really they're just. Pegula is funny because Pegula will interview everybody, right? He'll bring everybody in, and that's a good thing. If you're an assistant GM and you don't even necessarily want the job, it's good to go through an interview. To go through the process of it, and to see what it's like. Get your feet wet, get your name out there. Like the fact that it's very good for all those guys that John Shannon mentions their name, so it's not hard to get. Basically, anyone who's friends with Shannon is going to mention. Is going to be it's going to get their name mentioned and that's fine. And Shannon's one of the best. So.
What's odd is there wasn't one name of a real GM though. They're all assistant GMs.
Well, I think that's where they're going to go. I do. I don't think there's a real GM.
I don't know about that. I mean, but I just think that this list is weird because there's no, and I shouldn't say real GM, but there's no established GM name, and it's odd.
Well, I think there's some secrets that aren't being told on this because
I think there are too.
I know a couple people, and I also think that might be played in. That might happen too because there's some names they don't want out there because they might be more serious with them. And they also might not want those names out there because of the fact that we could see changes in the island, So I think what's happening with the island, I think they don't want to, the pressure here to put, if you put a name out there that the Islanders are also interested in, that could be a problem. So you're trying to keep it on the down low.
Yeah, but what it might also be is that the structure that the Sabres might be going for is the popular structure now of a team president, a general manager, and a coach, with the team president maybe being a guy, and I'm not saying him, but a guy like Lombardi, a veteran guy who's had GM experience, and all these names being mentioned are ones who have never been general managers, but they would be GM, but they would sort of be a second in command to that team president, sort of like Treliving and Burke in Calgary. So
I'll be honest, I don't think Pegula has a particular structure in mind because especially since the last time they talked about having that czar and he went along with it, I think now we don't know what his structure is because he wouldn't tell us. But I'm not sure he's even going to go with the popular model of the league, to be honest.
Well, the thing is, Russ, that right now the team president of the Buffalo Sabres is the current team president of the Buffalo Bills, Russ Brandon, who knows nothing about hockey. He's a PR, I believe he's a PR guy, and he was GM of the Bills for a while. So you're not going to get sort of any kind of direction or blueprint for Sabres success from a guy who was president of one of the worst NFL teams in history.
And I do want to say this too. I mean, I think that I'm not a big fan of. I'm not a huge fan of that structure. And not everybody is in the NHL. That it's interesting that this is happening. I mean, think about the success. What team? I was just trying to go through my head. Like Chicago's not that. Chicago doesn't work this way. The Kings don't work that way. The Penguins.
Well, all right, wait. Chicago, it's unsaid and untold. But I think at the beginning of Stan Bowman's start there, I think Scotty was that guy, Eck, and I think Stan was that guy, but Stan would never say that.
No, not Scotty, but wasn't John McDonough the team president?
John McDonough was a different thing.
No, he was the business guy, though.
John McDonough was making sure everything was was spun right. Okay,
yeah. He was the business guy and making sure stuff was spun. But I really think that the role of Scotty Bowman was much larger at the beginning than it was told, and I think Stan sort of took that second in command thing, even though he was the lead guy. And it just wasn't talked about.
I think that was true only for the very, very beginning, though.
Well, but I'm saying, but it was there.
Yeah, it was there, but I think I think that's also just that's a result of the fact that he's your dad. I mean, you're talking about a very different kind of situation. That doesn't exist everywhere. So you're one of the best GMs of coaches of all time is your dad. Of course, you're gonna go to him with stuff. But I think that they've never gone. I mean, the teams that I think about, teams that have gone this way. Obviously the Islanders went that way. They were one of the first to do this. I think I would say the Island. I mean, president. You can say all you want, but there's different ways of looking at this. Okay, there's team presidents. Every team has a president, and some of those team presidents aren't necessarily part of the hockey operations at all.
Right.
Some are, but at the end of the day, a lot of those team presidents, I think of, like in Philadelphia, when you had Peter Luukko here as team president. Right. He was part of the deal, but he didn't have any. He would be the first to tell you that if Holmgren wanted to do something or if Clark wanted to do something, they were going to do it. It had nothing.
Right.
But he was still a hockey guy.
Right.
But then they switched over to Holmgren, who is a hockey guy.
He is a hockey guy too, but Holmgren also, and it's hard to tell because the Flyers are so secretive about how this whole works right now. But I don't get the impression Holmgren has much say of what's going on now either.
I think on the scouting side.
Maybe on the scouting side.
On this, I think he has an opinion, and I think they listen to his opinion. Whether it gets acted on is another story, but I think
trade-wise, I don't think he's doing anything.
Not trade-wise. I think scouting-wise, I think he has an opinion like a lot of the other scouts do. I do.
But right now, I mean, Sather and Gorton with New York.
Right.
Nicholson and Chiarelli in Edmonton. Right. Lamoriello, Shanahan and Lamoriello in Toronto.
Yeah, definitely in Toronto.
Yeah.
New York, Sather's got a certain amount of power, but not.
He does. Don't be fooled.
I think Gordon's been given a bit more autonomy than you think there, Russ. I think Sather still is involved, but I think he's turned over a lot of the overall management of the team.
Yes. I think this year has been apparent.
But he will go to Sather and ask him questions, which is what makes sense.
Right. Well, that's what you want to do, right? That's like your mentor.
But that is still having power. Like Glenn Sather still has the owner's ear. Jeff Gorton does have the power. I don't say he doesn't. Yeah. But he, but there is some things. I'm sure Glenn Sather still gives his opinion on quite a few things.
And even in Toronto, when I've talked to people about what's happening with the team, it's lose the general manager of that team. Like they realize that. I mean, there's no question, but that is the case. And Babcock has a ton of power, as any coach would who's of his level. But the coach and GM, they both have power. That's a given. It's when the president, when you have another person come into that fray, is what I'm talking about. That's when I feel like it's a different thing, and you really haven't seen that really succeed anywhere. Like to the point where it was a disaster in Florida this year. It was a disaster. There's certain places where it's just been a complete and utter disaster. I mean, Detroit has always sort of done it, but Ken Holland has. They were sort of but the Islanders really did that committee thing. That's me. And that has not worked in other places. I don't think it's working.
I think Terry Pegula will go a different direction so he could say he went in a different direction.
Yeah.
And right. And he can put his stamp of approval on this, and then 2 years down the line he'll say I didn't have enough input in the decision.
You can't get it wrong a second time here.
Yeah.
No, you can't. I mean, but again, he's the owner, Jan, so he can get it wrong as many times as he wants.
He's the owner. There also is a fan base that you depend on attending games.
Yeah, they're showing up no matter what. Sabres fans show up, right, Mike?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, that's for sure. All right, folks, let's get out of here. Let's do that draft lottery simulator before we.
All right, let's do it.
All right, here we go. All right, today's draft lottery simulator is.
I'm trying to think if there's a team we haven't seen go first yet.
There are.
There definitely has to be a couple.
Dallas.
Yeah. Here. All right, followed by Florida and Arizona, who's named.
I'll tell you what, it would be scary if Florida went second because they already have a fair amount of talent. If they get a really great second pick, I mean, again, not going to play this year, but it really would add to a really good talent pool.
Yeah, no, it really would. You're absolutely right. All right,
Colorado desperately needs that first pick. Like they desperately need it.
No, they really do.
Because if they get the first pick, they can make some trades.
Yeah, they can, and I think you'll see the game move out of it pretty quickly. All right, folks, remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you tomorrow. Tomorrow the games are back. We'll have previews and all of our picks and everything like that. And as you know, last round we got nothing right, so, you can watch tomorrow if you like.
Entertainment purposes only.
Thank you.